Welcome everybody to another episode of the podcast. Today I have a really special guest that I really want you guys to meet. His name is Trent and he's the co-founder of Leadlio. Leadlio provides senior level sales talent that uses intent-driven data to run laser-focused outbound campaigns. And I think you can think of them as your outsourced enterprise sales team. Would that be like a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary of what we do.
Awesome. Today we're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about marketing, leadership, entrepreneurship. I wanted to start talking about baseball, actually.
Yeah.
So I saw doing my research trend that you were playing baseball in college. I played basketball myself.
Okay.
So what are some of the lessons that sports taught you and that have driven as well in your business career?
I mean, literally everything I owe business-wise to sports. I think the competition, both like internal as well as external in sports, is something that you cannot be taught in any other scenario. And I think that really comes through in strange and kind of like uncertain times like we're in now. Before we hit record on this, I think we were talking about like how people had one of two options to respond to all this stuff that's happening. And the first option is to go on offense, and the second option is to like cower in the corner and hope eventually somehow, some way we're all saved. And I think, me having that aggressive on the offense mindset has been 100% attributed to baseball and American football. And I think uniquely with baseball, so I was a pitcher, I was a catcher, and I played the outfield. And there's something to be said about baseball being a team game, but it's also very much an individual game within a team game. And I think from pitching, that is like a massive, of massive importance of quality. Right. So like when you're a pitcher, like you have a couple of different options of how you can attack the batter. Like your catcher puts down the signals, your defense is aligned in a certain way, but ultimately it's on you to execute that pitch to that batter, right? And then once like that pitch goes out of your hand and into the strike zone and the batter hits it, then you know that it's on your defense to make the play, right? And that to me is like that's like business, that's life, that sales, it's everything. You can control what you can control, and you're not going to like strike everybody out every single time. You're going to have to rely on the people that are around you and your team and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think my experience as a pitcher in baseball was like monumentally important for me in my mindset and my approach to business now.
That's one of the things that I keep saying in a lot of student athletes that then become entrepreneurs. And obviously you can learn this stuff in other places and you don't have to be an athlete to be a good entrepreneur. But I do think that there's some valuable lessons that sports teaches, right? For me, a lot of it about being a leader and leading my team. I run a small team at my company, but it's still a team. And as the company grows, it's going to become a bigger team. And I recognize myself thinking about leadership the same way I think about when I was a leader in sports, right? And not only in work ethic, but also in delegating and trusting your teammates, and that everybody needs a different type of leadership to be successful. And I saw that on my basketball team, where some players needed, for example, I performed better when my coach yelled at me and called me all the cuss words that he knew. That's when I did my best. But other teammates needed like nice words and being supportive. And I see the same with my team. I know that there's guys that I have to yell at, kind of. Obviously, we're in business and we have to be professional, but other people I have to be supportive. And that's one of the lessons that I learned myself about sports that then translates. I think it translates really, really well.
Yeah, I think so too. And the one thing I'll add to that I didn't recognize until like much, much later is how much sports requires you to have some sort of routine, right? And obviously like you have practice, and in practice you're running drills and like you're building relationships with your teammates and building trust with teammates. So by the time like you're actually in a game scenario, like you're prepared, you've been there before, right? You're not like trying to figure it out on the fly. And with like that routine, like even outside of practice and games, like what are you doing, outside of all of those things in order to better yourself? And I think that is like, in my experience and in the people that I surround myself with, I always try to find people that go like above and beyond. Like those are the guys that are shooting 1,000 free throws at 9:00 at night on a Friday instead of doing whatever it is other people do. So yeah, I think the comparisons are just so amazing, I think, from sports to business.
Yeah, even on the off season, right? In sports, the off
Yeah,
season in the summer, as an entrepreneur, maybe the off season is 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Or
yeah,
weekends, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I always compare those. Like this is my
yeah,
off season, even if it's 2 hours every day.
yeah, for sure.
And then I saw that you also did a short stint in law school. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct.
And then you made the switch to sales and marketing. And
Yeah,
I know it's a really interesting story and how that played out.
yeah. Yeah, so I double majored in undergrad econ and finance, and then I also minored in history. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I started to say like, well, okay, I'm pretty good at reading, I'm pretty good at writing. Like people that do that and have econ as a background, a lot of them go into law, so I'm gonna do that. And it was probably a few weeks into my first semester in law school, and I was like, this ain't it. Like this ain't it. And like the law school actually had professionals come in
Mhm.
and talk about like alcoholism rates, drug abuse rates, and like suicide rates of lawyers. And I'm thinking like something's weird about this. Like
Right.
it was like a moment of cognitive dissonance in my head. Like here we are, first year law students, and they have to bring in like professionals to
Right.
say like, this is how bad it could be if it's not the right fit. So, like, what the hell's going on? I'm like, I don't wanna be a miserable person.
Yeah,
So,
it's not a good
uh,
sales pitch by the law firm to like.
yeah, right. Well, I think it was honestly just to hedge their bets, right? Just to be
Right.
like, we're not gonna be held liable for
Yeah,
your
yeah. We did our
alcoholism.
part. We did our part.
Yeah, which was so meta law school to begin with. But
Yeah.
in any case, yeah, I committed to doing the first year, and then I was like, I had 3 internships lined up that summer after my first year. One was with a government lobbying firm. One was with the city that I live in, and then the third one was a marketing internship with a nonprofit organization. And the first two were paid, and then the nonprofit was an unpaid internship. And I was like, all right, well, these are two very clear career paths like that I'm gonna just have to put my head down and trudge through, or I can go completely off the rails and do marketing.
Mhm.
And what was funny about like that is even when I was in law school, I was getting involved in some like the student groups and that sort of thing. And a lot of my activities that I was doing was like recruiting attorneys from the alumni of the law school to come back and speak and mentor and that sort of thing. And like trying to get people to get involved. And it was like very much like a marketing biz
Right.
dev like sales type of stuff that I was doing without even realizing it.
Mhm.
So long story short, I ended up doing the marketing internship. And because I had already graduated college and I was already in in law school, I was older than all the interns
Right.
at the marketing internship. So like I got to work on different stuff than they did. Like I wasn't doing um, I wasn't making photocopies. Like I was
Right.
actually
Right. Right.
participating in like marketing campaign stuff. And actually I gained audience with the CMO, the global CMO, and
Mhm.
the VP of marketing, VP of comms, VP of interactive marketing, who was awesome. And he's a really good dude. And they kind of took me under their wing. And I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this.
Right.
And so I had a very difficult conversation with my parents about how I was going to drop out of law school and um, pursue my MBA instead, and then ultimately end up in sales and marketing. So that's the genesis of
That's how it
all.
came up. It's interesting because when I was in college, I think I was a junior,
Yeah.
and at that point, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer,
Okay.
and I started checking out law schools. And
Yeah.
first, I saw how expensive they were, and I was like, "Oh fuck, this is gonna be a problem." I was like,
Yeah.
"Before I do that, let me do a quick internship somewhere,
Yeah.
right?" So I put
Yeah.
on the only suit that I had, printed a
Yeah.
resume with no experience, never worked before, and kind of knocked on every door in a small town in North Carolina that I was in,
Yeah.
and I got an internship. And I think a month in, I realized, okay, this isn't it. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want to do, but this isn't it.
Yeah.
And I relate to that feeling of like, oh fuck, it's not. Maybe it's because the expectations of being a lawyer different from what the reality is, but
Yeah.
I saw that it wasn't my thing either.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've heard a lot of people have that story, and honestly, like I've had a lot of people say to me, like, good for you for recognizing it early and like
Right.
not being
Too
10
late,
years
right?
in, a mountain of student debt. Um, and like you have like golden handcuffs, right? Like you can't leave at that point. Like you
Right.
can't start over when you're 40. You can when you're still in your 20s. So
For sure.
I mean, I still have a lot of friends that are lawyers and they're doing a
Mhm.
great job. And kudos to them for sticking it out. But I needed more immediate feedback on the
Right.
stuff that I was doing, and I think that's what makes some people tick, and good for them.
Absolutely.
But I'm wired a little differently.
Yeah. And then you find, how did you end up at UTech? Because I know you had a lot of success
Yeah,
there, and I do
yeah,
want to talk about a couple of stories from there.
yeah,
But
yeah.
how did that process come about?
Yeah. So the first job after my marketing internship was selling advertising, TV advertising
Okay.
for local businesses in the Chicagoland area, and it was a big company, large national sales force, and this was whatever it was, 2013, 14 maybe. And the company didn't have a CRM, and that was with like 1,000 national sales reps.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really weird.
Right.
Like how could you have so many people doing sales, but like nobody knows what's going on? Um, so I got a couple clients under my belt, but I also realized like this ain't it
This
either.
in the
And
place, right?
I started asking around about like I was scheduling informational interviews essentially.
Mhm.
I was going out to marketing companies and asking like, what does it take to actually make a career in marketing? Like, who are some of like the marketing, like smart marketing people in my hometown and that
Right.
sort of thing. And everybody kept referring back to this kid named Wilbur. And I had heard of him because he went to one of the high schools here in town, and it was the same high school that a lot of my friends went to. So like I kind of sort of knew of him, but we didn't know each other. So anyway, I put him on a list of people I wanted to work for. I created a list on Twitter of, and like it literally
Right.
said people I want to work for. So obviously he got a notification from that, and within like 5 minutes he direct messaged me and said, hey, what's your phone number? And I gave him my phone number. And like 5 minutes after that, we got on a call. It was basically the first interview, and
Right.
talking about like my background and like what I wanted to do and all that kind of stuff. And then I went in and I interviewed formally, if you will, the next day. And then by the following Monday, it was my first day there. So I left
Wow.
a full-time salary plus commission job for that TV advertising company, and took a commission only job with UTech. And I
That's
was the
crazy.
fifth employee there. Yeah. In like I don't know, I don't want to misquote it, but it was like a 500 square foot office. And it was just me and four other people, Wilbur being the
Just
CEO,
figuring out.
and yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's how that started.
It's crazy, and I'm branching out of what I was wanting to ask you, but
Yeah,
the power of social media to connect people
yeah,
that you want to build a relationship with is impressive.
yep,
I mean, you and I think, are proof of that, because like
yeah,
this podcast comes from
right,
seeing each other's content on LinkedIn and Twitter. That
yep,
job comes from like building a list on Twitter.
yeah,
It's incredible the amount of opportunity that social media allows us
yeah,
to connect with others.
yeah. Which is why I don't, for the life of me, understand how people either like denounce social media as
Right,
a networking tool or like a sales tool or like just a tool. Like it's
right.
there, it's free. Like twitter.com is free, linkedin.com is free. Like why people don't use it, I don't really understand. But again, I hope to tell my stories more often because it's proof that this stuff actually works.
And that you're just one DM or one tweet or
Yeah,
one LinkedIn post away, right?
yeah,
From a
absolutely.
client, from a friend,
Yeah,
from a girlfriend, or because I
yeah,
met my
right.
girlfriend online as well. I met my
Yeah,
girlfriend on
yeah,
ex-girlfriend on Quora, and
yeah.
like business partners, clients,
That's
everybody
crazy.
comes from one DM, one call message, one cold email away.
Yeah.
And then you get to UTech, and one of the stories that I thought were interesting is how you closed the first $1 million deal in
Mhm.
company's history. So I was
Yeah.
wondering how that came about, and if you could give me some of the keys of success that you had there, because UTech's a marketing agency, or
Yeah.
was.
Yep.
So
Yep.
as someone running a content marketing agency myself, what were the keys of success for you to grow there?
Yeah. So the $1 million deal, you will be shocked to know, came originally through LinkedIn.
Crazy.
So we were so UTech's based in Naperville, which is a suburb of Chicago, and we were opening up a second office in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we were actively looking to build business and network in
Mhm.
Scottsdale. And there's a lot of former Chicagoans that move to Scottsdale because it's a little bit better business climate, that sort of thing. It's definitely better weather climate, and I've always been interested in sports, obviously, and I was reaching out to folks that were in the sports industry in Scottsdale that had some sort of tie to back to Chicago. And it turned out there was one guy who was the editor for a sports publication
Mhm.
that was based in Scottsdale, but had really, really deep ties to Chicago. Like all of like the ownership group was from Chicago and that sort of thing. So the first, message that I sent, I connected with the guy,
Mhm.
the editor, and then I also connected with his director of marketing, and just said, "Hey, we're a Chicago marketing agency, and much like you, we think Scottsdale's about to blow up in a
Blow
good
up.
way, and I just want to be a resource for you. These are some of the other publishers that we work with, and you know who knows where this thing could go, whatever." So we were flying back and forth from Scottsdale to Chicago quite a bit, a couple times a month to get these meetings scheduled and booked. So we had like our first meeting and then our second meeting. Then they ended up coming back to Chicago and we had a couple conversations, and then it turned out they got acquired by a larger investment group, and then from that, we built them a mobile app,
Gotcha.
and that was, yeah, the first $1 million deal. So
It's interesting to me, and one of the things that you and I have talked both on calls and online
yeah,
are the importance of creating content and to giving out value.
yeah,
And yesterday I read by an expert in content marketing on LinkedIn as well, and he said this. Let me quote him: "Even the ABM cadences are super transactional. The only
hmm,
marketing intent is to convert to a meeting, not to actually provide value."
yeah,
And I thought it was interesting. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. Do you
yeah.
agree with me?
I agree, and I think so. I don't think this whole pandemic changed anything other than it exposed that people were doing really bad sales and marketing practices for a
Right.
long time, and they were able to get away with it. Now, like, good luck if you're sending like the same, hey, this is what we do. Can we schedule a 20-minute demo? Like
You're over. You're done for.
that ain't it. So I really like how Josh Braun frames it. So what Josh always says is like, make deposits, not withdrawals.
Yep.
And what is a deposit? A deposit could be publishing your best content for free. A deposit could be something like that's super relevant and super tactical that somebody can sink their teeth into, and that's what we're doing now too, in this kind of like brave new world. All the playbooks that we are running currently for clients, we're publishing them. Like,
Right.
it's name redacted, so we kind of protect our clients in that regard. But we're showing people exactly which messages are working, what channels they're working on, like what the actual response rates are, and like actually screenshotting responses from people, in the cadence.
Right.
And to me, that's the only way you can do it, right? People don't care about anything else that you have to say. They want to know that it works, and
Right.
they want to know that you're legit, and they want to know that within a certain range of reasonability that your stuff. So yeah, I definitely agree with that quote. And we can go a lot of different paths down like the ABM side of it, but most ABM is still just sales,
Mhm.
that they think is personalized. But even like the personalization of it, like what I've been seeing quite a bit in like personalized account based marketing is, hey, first name.
Right.
Like that's not personalization. That's not account based. That's not anything. That's just like, if you're putting merge tags in, good for you. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
MailChimp solved that 12
Good.
years ago.
Good job, bro.
And
Yeah.
yeah, right. So So yeah, long and the short, I definitely agree with that quote.
Yeah, and look, I think it's understandable that we all run a business, right? And
Yeah.
we all want to make money, and we all
Mhm.
want to book the right meetings to make money.
Yeah.
So I think it would be lying to ourselves if we didn't um, confess, if you want, that we do want to make a sale, if
Mhm.
possible.
Mhm.
If we can help them, we want to make that sale.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to hide that because everybody is. But I do understand that the level of over indexing on transactional that 99% of the people
Yeah.
out there doing, especially when you're doing sales and outreach,
Yeah.
but even including ABM, including people that create content and the content sucks and they're just
Yeah.
doing it for the call to action at the bottom, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So I do think yes, the goal is to help people and close that sale, but we can go more relationship based, right? And
Mhm.
we can
Yeah.
do the deposits that you mentioned, Josh Brown.
Yeah.
Josh Brown, you're supposed to be on the podcast in June. You agreed to that, so we'll hold you to it. And and talking about relationship, one of the other topics I want to discuss with you
Yeah.
is with the rise of automation and that
Mhm.
fight between automation between versus relationship. How do you play in that opposite dynamic? Is it an opposite dynamic to start? What do you think about how those two forces interact?
Yeah. Well, so I think that's very topical because my background was very much relationship based selling and like finding really good people that were willing to refer business, that were willing to kind of extend themselves to help me build network and influence and that sort of thing. And then my business partner, Aaron, we just had a conversation about this morning. His background was an outbound lead generation.
Mhm.
So he was running, the 5,000 prospect outbound cadences. And when you do numbers like that, like even a 2% conversion rate is great,
Right.
like that's a lot of revenue. So
Mhm.
what we have found is like merging the two, depending on client focus is very, 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 very important. And the whole reason why we adopted account based is because like volume based, lead centric, outbound, like it is purely a numbers game, and you don't care if you get 30% uh, unsubscribe rate or like 10% undeliverability rate or like
Right.
God forbid you get blacklisted. So when it comes to automation, I think there's smarter ways to do it. I just feel like most people have taken the lazy way and they create their sequence and then they don't really vet the contact list and they don't really make the messaging relevant for those individuals that are going to be part of that prospecting list. So like, for example, we use a tool called reply.io and it's a sales engagement
Mhm.
tool. It's like outreach, it's like Salesloft, etc.
Yeah, I
But we
started
always,
using after you recommended it
yeah,
to me actually.
yeah, yeah, awesome. And what we do with that is obviously we have a first name, last name, contact, whatever. But the merge tags we put in are always custom insights, and it takes us
Mhm.
a hell of a lot longer to create lists.
Yeah.
So whether that custom insight is like we have a client that's in the security space, and we reference like the amount of crime that has happened in their um, market that they work in,
Mhm.
right? Like, so it takes a lot of time. We're creating 18 additional
Right.
columns, but we're going a little bit above and beyond in order to make it more relevant, and create better insights for them so they can sink their teeth into it. So yeah, automation, I think, has to happen in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it's not. You can't just like paint over sales with automation. So um, I don't know what like the quote unquote
But
right mix is, but like automation should help you do your job better. It shouldn't make your prospects' lives harder, and I think
I love that.
that's the big miss that we've made as a sales industry, and I think a lot of that comes from like the whole predictable revenue model, and Aaron Ross and Aaron and Jason Lemkin, like obviously they built that machine at Salesforce and did an amazing job with it. But as SDRs, we're comped on appointments set. Well, how do you get more appointments set? You you
Right.
enroll many more prospects into it, and then that's when a lot of the sales engagement tools started rolling out, some better than others. And I think we just like got it all ass backwards. Like we shouldn't be worried about volume. Like we should be worried about like creating value and meaningful impact within businesses. Like it's okay if like your software or your service isn't a fit for somebody.
Right.
Um, like there's no software in the world that I don't think that should or could be ubiquitous. Like you gotta understand like what uniquely you bring to the table that very few other people can provide.
Yeah.
So
Do you agree that the problem is that we're optimizing for the wrong things, which is
yeah,
incentivizing the wrong behavior?
for sure,
Because I
absolutely,
think if we optimize for meeting set
yeah,
versus optimizing for revenue generated
mhm,
or other metrics that are more meaningful to the top line revenue, I think
yeah,
that incentivizes a bit of a better behavior
yeah,
versus, all right, let me just get a bunch of meetings that are low qualified, that are not ready to buy,
yeah,
and we scale through just putting more SDRs and more AEs,
yeah.
and then it's super expensive, and we're just increasing the overhead as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I think it was like 60, maybe 40%. I don't know if it's 60 or 40 or 40 or 60 of salespeople didn't hit quota in 2019. And like, well, why is that? Well, because we're using a poor metric model,
Right.
like we think through automation and that sort of thing, like we can achieve scale. And I think like that's one thing that I hope as the world changes now, like we stop fetishizing the concept of scale. Like if you can only be successful in your investors' eyes because like you've hit the blitz scaling model, like I don't know. To me, that's not appealing. And I
I
think
agree.
that's when you get all of these bad habits established, and it's really difficult to break bad habits. So yeah, to your point, I think we're definitely incentivizing the wrong types of behavior and activity when we should be really more focused on results.
Absolutely. And then a couple of questions more before we wrap this up. One of
Yeah,
the things that I really wanted to ask you is because you know much more about ABM than I do, and I wanted to ask you about what are your thoughts on how the role of content on ABM and
yeah,
thought leadership, especially.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I think it's more useful or more tactical to run through like a scenario,
Mhm.
and I'll run through one like that we use. So again, we'll use the security company as an example. So for us to get an audience with a VP of corporate security for a Fortune 100 brand, they're not downloading a white paper and they're not going to join a webinar and they're not going to, answer a cold email. So how do we get in front of them? Well, we work through not just the VP of corporate security, but we also identify in the organizational map who his direct reports are or her direct reports are. Are those people engaging with anything on LinkedIn? Are those people? Is there any intent data that supports any of the service offerings? And then we're building out content that's relevant and actionable. And I think that's the one thing that we've taken a little bit of different approach from. Like again, security example, we know that when times get a little bit tougher and a little bit more unpredictable, crime usually goes up. So what do? We create a custom insights report for all of the locations that they have physical buildings in, right?
Right. I love that.
So we say, hey, John Smith, I know, this you might not be ready to make a deal. You might not even be ready to book a demo. That's totally fine. Here is a report from March 9th to April 9th of all of the crime in all of the communities that you currently have facilities
Love that.
in. And we're using a public database to pull all the commercial theft
Mhm.
occurrences and instances in those places, and we're giving very subtle actions in the report to say, hey, by the way, 98% of our customers, once they've installed the security solution, they don't experience theft again. So like it's very little, but it's something that one, they can sink their teeth into, and then two, like even if like John Smith doesn't have the time as VP of corporate security, his underlings are coming back and saying, we're seeing a big increase in
Right.
Portland, Oregon, and in Miami right now. what additional resources can we have? Maybe we ought to test, this security solution in one of those two ports. And if that goes well, it might be something for us to look at, across the board. So that's an example of content, actionable content when it comes to like thought leadership specifically. I think the best example that I could give right now of people that I really appreciate their approach to it is Chris Walker from Refine Labs, and Jake Dunlap from Scaled. And like what those guys are doing, like they're both in business, one's in sales, one's in marketing. They both recognize that, yeah, they could probably pick up the phone and cold call a bunch of people and have a really compelling message. But what they're doing is they're like doing webinars, they're doing live recordings, they're having like Zoom calls I think Demand Gen Live is like 6:30 on every Tuesday night and that sort of thing. That's what Chris is doing. So like they're building brand, and they're building mind share within their prospects. And when those prospects reach like that tipping point, like their holy shit moment, guess who those prospects are going to call? They're going to call Jake, they're going to call Chris, and they're going to say, how can we roll something out? And I think that's the kind of getting back to some of the metrics talk as well. Like you can't really measure brand, but it is so important. And if people don't know your brand, then they're a lot less likely to trust you, put it that way.
Absolutely. And because there's the awareness part and there's the trust part that comes with brand. And like you said, maybe this is for another podcast episode, but it's really hard to measure brand. But I think in a qualitative way, you can see if what you're doing is working versus it's not.
Yeah.
And then the last question before we wrap this up, I just wanted to ask you in a couple of minutes, what are your general thoughts on the social media landscape in B2B and what you're doing on LinkedIn to drive business for your company? And what do you think people should do as well, and how to utilize social media in B2B?
Yeah. So in terms of what we're doing, I was posting 5 times a week, every single day or every single week for like literally the last 52 weeks up until the last couple of weeks. And I've gone down to 3 times per week. Why is that? Because the time that we're spending doing client work is that much more important, because it just is.
That's where the money comes from.
Yeah, right. So, but how are we making the biggest impact on those 3 times per week that I'm posting? We're recording a podcast or an interview once a week, and then we're publishing a snippet of that once per week, and then revisiting that same one the next week. And we're interviewing people across many different disciplines within like the sales and marketing realm, right? So we're trying to broaden the approach, not just be like the account-based marketing guys or the account-based sales guys. Like this morning, we interviewed somebody who's the director of partnerships for a Microsoft partner group. And like we're talking about how partnerships are a really good go-to-market strategy for a lot of businesses and that sort of thing. So the nice thing, I mean, this is the whole reason why you're recording this, and the whole reason why we record all of our stuff video first, and then strip out the audio, and then transcribe it to text.
Yes, sir.
Because it comes from the Gary V content deck, the 108 page, whatever. And it's documenting instead of creating. And I think that's like the beauty of it all. So that's what we're doing on our end. The other thing that I would mention as well is find networking groups. And I'm not talking like necessarily like LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups or Slack channels or anything like that, but find people in a target industry that you've done some work for in the past and you want to continue to work with, and figure out where they hang out. And I'll give an example. So a friend of mine, Dan, he is in a networking group of about 15 people in Chicagoland area, and they're almost all in like the IT sector, and they sell to different segments of the industry. And Dan invited us to be part of their networking session earlier this week. And we created a deck. We ran through a playbook. We gave like very real world examples of how to do what we do.
Love that.
And we had a very simple CTA. If you want to see who's looking for your solutions and your services, let us know, and we'll pull a list of 100 accounts that are looking for, you know, your product or service.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had 3 people out of 12 respond already.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that, and I don't know if they'll end up turning into clients. It really doesn't matter, to be honest, because as far as that experiment is concerned, it's a win. So I think the more you can niche down, and like the more you can really understand where people hang out, and then be useful there, like instead of just saying like, hey, do you guys know anybody that needs any sales or marketing help? Like get the hell out of my face. Like, this isn't like a lead generation thing. This is like, hey, there's a better way to do things, and you as a salesperson ought to know that, and we're giving you the tools to do it, whether you work with us or not. So
what a way to finish. I think this is some of the most practical advice, because I think a lot of people get confused on that, right? And they become selfish on the reasons. And this is something we've discussed all throughout the episode, but yes, there's a selfish motive at the end, but we need to make sure we're relationship based and we're there to help. And if we cannot help them, we send them to somebody that can, because it's not our goal to just sell, but help.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Trent, for being here. Thank you for your time. Where can people reach to you, both on social and business-wise?
LinkedIn.com/in/growth Trent, I believe, is my URL. And then our website is leadlio.com, leadlio.com. Take a look at some of the playbooks for publishing. I mean, I think we've pretty much run the gamut on every industry and every solution. So, if you have questions, just holler. But I really appreciate you having me on, Marty. It's always a pleasure to spend some time talking shop with you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you guys want to subscribe and share, do it. If not, totally cool. And we'll see you next time on the next episode. Thank you very much.